Hello, I'm Senator Ben Cardin. Welcome to Facebook Live, an opportunity that I take advantage of every so often to communicate with people through Facebook, to take a timely subject, give you an opportunity to hear from experts, and to try to answer your questions on the subject. So today we're going to talk about the immigration policies of America. We know that this has been an issue of debate for a long time. We know how it was centered in the Trump administration, how President Trump acted with executive orders that were very controversial, how President Biden has reversed some of those executive orders, and there's now legislation pending in the United States Senate. The question is, what is the status of our current immigration policies? What needs to be done? And how can we get to where we need to as far as America and immigration? So I'm pleased to have two really strong experts on the subject. People have been in the field for a long time, can help us put a face on the issues. We talk numbers, but it's always good to know about the lives that are impacted by the immigration policy. Gustavo Torres is the Executive Director of CASA de Maryland. He has been a longtime champion of immigration reform. He has presence not only in the state of Maryland, but also in other states, including Virginia. And not too long ago, opened up a new center in Southeast Baltimore that we were very proud to be there when that was done. Krish O'Mara Vignarajah is the President and CEO of the Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Services. That organization is one of the premier organizations to help immigrants in our community. They've been involved in our community for a long, long time. And Krish brings experience having worked in policy for girls with Michelle Obama, so brings a lot of experience to this discussion. So first, I want our viewers to know what the two of you do in your organizations, because I'm really proud of what CASA de Maryland does and what the Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Services do. So I'll start with Gustavo. If you could just tell us your mission and perhaps give us how you see the current status of immigration in America.
Absolutely. Again, Senator, thank you so much for this opportunity, and thank you for your leadership in the Senate. To pass the comprehensive immigration reform, we definitely need leaders like you who had the commitment to be able to happen. CASA represents a group of passionate, community-conscious people working to organize, advocate, and provide services for more than 100,000 people who are our members in Maryland. We believe that it's very essential that we provide services, in particular right now with this crisis that we face, Senator, as you know, to vaccinate our community. So we are partnered, with the University of Maryland, with the Adventist Hospital, with the state of Maryland. And now I am very pleased to let you know, Senator, that we started the vaccination in CASA. So we started in Prince George, in Baltimore, as well as in Montgomery County. So now, physicians and nurses are going to be in our facilities providing these very, very important services for our community. But one of the main issues that we face, of course, is immigration. Immigration is a very serious issue because we have thousands and thousands of immigrants who are undocumented right over here in Maryland, and we believe that is very essential that we fix this. That is the reason why we celebrate the decision of the governor, of the president, to support comprehensive immigration reform, to support, the dreamers, the TPS holders, the farm workers. So we are very, very excited about the next steps that is going to happen in Congress and in this country.
Thank you. Krish, could you want to tell us a little bit about what the Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Services is doing and your observations of the current status of immigration?
Sure. It's an honor to be with you again and all the Marylanders that are participating in today's town hall. Really grateful for the chance to share our perspective from LIRS and to highlight the ways in which we serve people here in Maryland and beyond. But to start, I'd just like to commend you, Senator, for your recent reintroduction of the Secure Act, which would bring relief to many recipients of temporary protected status, or TPS, across the country, and especially here in Maryland, where TPS recipients are not just our neighbors and friends, but they're essential workers who represent key pillars of our state's economy. We appreciate you being our champion in Washington. For background on our organization, LRS is the largest faith-based national nonprofit dedicated to immigrants and refugees. We began our work of welcome over 80 years ago. Since then, we have responded to every major immigration crisis and supported and empowered more than 500,000 immigrants and refugees. Today, we're here, of course, to talk about what we hope proves to be the dawn of a new day in our work of welcome. After an extraordinarily difficult 4 years, the immigration system in the U.S. has experienced a sea change in both tone and substance. President Biden, in his first month of office, issued over 10 executive actions focused on immigration. The focus of these actions are on restoring humanity and sanity to immigration and refugee policy, as they have acted to end discriminatory travel bans, restoring DACA and special protections for Liberians, accelerating efforts to reunite separated families, encouraging citizenship and integration, as well as rebuilding programs that resettle refugees. Under the last administration, there were over 1,000 immigration policy changes, spanning everything from refugee resettlement and asylum, discriminatory bans on entry, DACA, access to lawful permanent residency and citizenship. President Biden's initial actions have started to roll back some of the most draconian and harmful of Trump's immigration policies that have caused so many, including Maryland families, to suffer. So now we see Congress needs to act. Congress, has obviously taken some important steps in the last month or two, but we want to see Congress take steps to forge lasting change and to provide permanent solutions. While there is a long list, I just will briefly touch on the legislative efforts that connect most to our work. And would set important safeguards to prevent discriminatory practices in the future. So, for example, the No Ban Act was reintroduced into Congress. It would prohibit all future refugee bans that discriminate based on religion. The provisions of the No Ban Act are also included in the U.S. Citizenship Act of 2021, which would institute key reforms to address our frankly long outdated and dysfunctional immigration system. So LRS has supported this legislation. We actually sent a letter just last week signed by 568 faith leaders calling for timely passage. We need this act, not just to fix the current issues with our immigration system, but to transform it altogether. And I know that together we can do that. So let me just end by saying we are grateful for champions like you, Senator Cardin, and your colleagues in the Maryland delegation who have supported immigrants and the agencies that serve them, like CASA and LIRS, especially during the darkest days of the last administration. And we can look forward to continuing our work together as we build a brighter future for immigrants and our nation.
So let me try to define certain classes of people we have in our community. We have dreamers, we have DACA registrants, we have TPS holders, we have those that are on deferred enforcement departure DED. So let us understand who these people are, what their legal status is, and what we need to do in order to ensure their future. So let me start with Gustavo, if I might. I've been with you many times. I've seen the individuals that came over here legally under TPS, who have been here for an extended period of time. They really have no other home. I've been so impressed by the dreamers who have come forward to express their stories, young people who are now reaching their adult ages, in many cases are adults who have been here just about their entire life. So tell us a little bit about the different categories, and perhaps also explain that in a given family, you could have children in different status. Yeah,
and absolutely. I'm happy to share just so many categories, so very complicated for a regular citizen to understand this. But in general, all of the people that you mentioned, they have really temporary status. They are legal in this country, like the TPS, the Dreamers. They are legal in this country, but they are not formally in a process to apply for citizenship or permanent resident, because they are only through the executive orders. For instance, let's just put me one example: the TPS holders. They are people who have, in many occasions, who have been here for like 25 years, and they need to reapply every 18 months for work authorization. And every 18 months, they need to go and check, their status. They need to pay around like, $500 all the time that they do that. And there are people who have been here for many, many years, who have families already, who are, kids who are US citizens because they born right over here. So still the parents are with the TPS, meaning with this temporarily status, but the kids are US citizens. So just one example, in Maryland, we have around like, 22,500 TPS holders. There are people that we also call essential workers, because they work in all of our different economy, right? They are like, the people who work in Uber to deliver our food, right? People who work in hospitals, cleaning the hospitals, or nurses, people who have been working really hard to save our lives. In Dreamers, they are young people who also is the same status, right? We have around like, 19,000 Dreamers right here in Maryland. And it's kind of the same situation, but those Dreamers, the young people, they are professionals. Many of them are teachers, nurses. They're doing an extraordinary job in this society. And that is the people that we believe that we need to resolve once and for all the legal status. That is the reason why we strongly support President, Biden decision for comprehensive immigration reform, because we believe that it's time to save those people. We need to send a strong message to our communities and this nation. Those people are essential workers. They save us in the middle of this crisis. We need to help and to resolve the legal status. Many people are undocumented as well. We have around like 110,000 undocumented essential workers in Maryland. People who don't have legal status, but they are working in the economy and they are working to help us. That is the kind of people who are going to be, actually liberated, because the immigration status or the immigration reform that President Biden, as well as, the Congress, is pushing right now to pass.
And Krish, the Obama administration, by executive order, provided some temporary protection for the Dreamers. Those that are in temporary protective status are protected under statute from the point of view of being able to apply for work. But as Gustavo pointed out, that's temporary. And we saw under President Trump, it was not extended, putting into question as to whether they were literally going to be picked up and deported, even though they were here legally under protection because of the circumstances in their native country. So explain a little bit more about how you see this playing out and the relationship between these different categories.
Yeah. The category of Dreamers is one that frankly receives incredible support from Americans. I think this is the empathy and understanding of Americans when it comes to individuals, children, who arrived. This is the only home they've ever known. They, have gone to school here. They are working hard, as Gustavo mentioned, in terms of essential workers. They represent hundreds of thousands who, for the last year, have been fighting on the front lines every day for our health, for our safety, for our security, even for kind of our comfort. And that's where I think there are some important actions that have been taken, but obviously we need to make sure that we move forward. We know that there's now the DREAM Act of 2021, and so the goal is to make sure that based on two criteria, that we can ensure that as many of the about 2 million would be protected. Under the Trump administration, we knew that the previous administration had really gone after Dreamers, and there is clearly constitutional protection that this group deserves and has received. But I think the question now is, legislatively, what can we do to make sure that there's permanence? What can we do to make sure that there's stability? What can we make sure to do to ensure that this remains their homeland, and that they are welcomed and that they know that this is where they belong?
And I agree with that point. I must tell you, there's nothing more impressive than listening to the Dreamers themselves. And I remember during the early years of the Trump administration, where there was a real fear of the Dreamers being literally picked up and deported. And many went into hiding because they were worried that they were going to be separated from their families and from their life. And so many came forward to tell their story. What courage. And testify, knowing full well that their names and their faces would now be known by immigration officials under the Trump policies, putting them at great risk. But they wanted their story to be known by Americans. And you're absolutely correct. The overwhelming sentiment in this country is, this is your home. We don't want you to leave. We need to figure out a way to get this done. And that's why, and Senator Durbin's been one of our principal leaders on this, we've had efforts in the past to act solely for the Dreamers. We always say include TPS in that because TPS is very, very similar. And we know many families where you have a family member that's here under TPS and another family member that's here under as a Dreamer. So you can have that difference in the same family. And you can have a U.S. citizen also among the a person who was born here. So we really need to sort this out. The bottom line is America is their home. They've helped build a stronger America. They've helped us during this pandemic. They've helped us in so many ways build this great nation, as we have seen by immigrants in the past. And their future is here. We need to remove the anxiety and uncertainty and make that a clear path forward. And that's been our goal on immigration reform. So we've been trying to do this for a while. I was part of the Senate in 2013, in which we passed a bill in the United States Senate. My recollection was it was close to 70 votes or thereabouts. So it was well in excess of the so-called 60 vote threshold that you need in the United States Senate. It included some very conservative members and very progressive members. And I remember very clearly not being happy with that bill because it contained, to me, some very harsh provisions that I thought were a little bit too harsh for the pathway towards citizenship. But I supported it enthusiastically because that's how we have to pass legislation. We need to come together forward with legislation. So I want to acknowledge and thank my friend, Senator Menendez, for taking the leadership on the bill this year, the U.S. Citizenship Act. I'm a co-sponsor of the bill. I enthusiastically support it. But if I were to write the bill myself, it would be different. There would be other things that I would want to include, et cetera. So I would be surprised if the two of you agree with everything in this bill, or there are things in this bill that you would like to see stronger or different, or things that are left out that you would like to see in. But we need to pass legislation. Is this the right framework for us to move forward? And tell us a little bit about why this bill would help, or where is its shortcomings, and where do we need to move forward?
So Senator, first of all, I want to go back a little bit to the comments about the Dreamers and TPS, and that is the reason why we value tremendously your leadership, because the Dreamers are very popular. They are amazing. They are like, the example of, the American dream, honestly, right? Because when they describe how they feel and what they do and the contribution in the society, it's like, oh my God, how we are not going to liberate those extraordinary young people. But to be very honest, not a lot of people speak about the TPS holders, people who make the same contributions or more, right? and you come and say, we need to include them. We need to include the TPS holders. It's so very important. And you know, because you met with them, how extraordinary they are as well. So I really appreciate your leadership and your support to make sure that we include those families together, not only the dreamers, but the entire families, because actually those parents are the original dreamers. So I think that is very, very important that I just want to celebrate and congratulate, because you did an extraordinary move to include the TPS holders. And again, thank you very much.
Gustavo, before I let you go on to the next point, I thank you for that. I want you to know that Senator Van Hollen and myself will raise that issue every time anyone says dreamers. We tell them and TPS. So we want to make sure that they're included as one category. And I think we've gotten our message across, because I heard Senator Durbin mention both together. And so we're making progress on that. You're absolutely correct. And I give you credit for that, because you introduced us to the immigrant community in a way that sensitized us to the fact that the TPS holders are in an identical situation to the dreamers as far as their future is concerned. And we really need to consider them together.
No, absolutely. And actually, we celebrate the decision from President Biden about the Venezuelan community, right? It's around 300,000. And still, we have so many other countries that deserve the same treatment. Like, for instance, we have thousands of members from Cameroon who are in the same or worse situation that the Venezuelan country. So we really need to address that. And we hope that the president and the Secretary of Homeland Security, who, by the way, is an extraordinary secretary, is going to do the right thing to make sure that he provide TPS status also to the Cameroonian community. But let me go back to your question about why we support this immigration reform. We believe that is very, very critical and very important that we don't tie all the time the issue of criminal requirements for immigration reform. We believe that is wrong. We believe that, honestly, there have been situations that mostly focus on Black and brown people when you speak about criminal bars requirements. And I believe that is very important that we, check a secondary review provision to see how that is going to work, because we want the best legislation possible. Our community have been suffered tremendously. Unfortunately, under President Obama, more than 2 million people have been deported, right? That is the truth. Under President Biden, under President Trump, we were criminal, rapists. We were the worst in the society. So now it's an opportunity for us to demonstrate the extraordinary contribution that the immigrant community provide to this society. And in Maryland in particular, we have, examples of billions of dollars that we receive because our immigrant families pay taxes, regardless of the immigration status, pay billions of dollars. I said, and, the Comptroller Francho speak all the time about this. The contribution is just unbelievable. So anyway, that is the reason why we support this legislation. And we hope that we are going to work with you, with Senator, Van Hollen, to make sure that we make the necessary changes to pass the legislation. You described one issue that is very important. And it's about that we need 60 votes, right? We need 10 Republican senators to pass the legislation. And I want to be very frank and very honest, and Senator, we don't know if we are going to accomplish that, to be honest with you. You know how difficult it is. They become more like ultra-right people, like with President Trump position, rather than, a centrist senator. So that is kind of the challenge that we face. And now we need to speak about how we are going to be sure that we are going to pass something good for our families. So right now, Senator Padilla is introducing the essential workers legislation to be part of the infrastructure, bill. I hope, and we hope, that we are going to incorporate that, because we speak about between 5 to 7 million people who are essential workers, and they could benefit from this legislation. So anyway, we need to think about different strategies here to make sure that we bring relief and we can liberate these extraordinary people.
And if I can just, oh, sorry, Senator.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, what I just want to add is I completely agree with everything that's been said so far. I mean, I think that what is great about the Citizenship Act and its proposal is it's not fully comprehensive, but it addresses some key areas. It recognizes that we are operating in 2021 and a border wall is not the answer, that there are smarter technologies that we can rely on that are much more effective, but that recognize the legal rights of so many who are seeking refuge and protection here in the U.S. It also recognizes the root causes of immigration, knowing that it is an issue of last resort. I mean, no one wants to flee their homeland. Like my family came here from Sri Lanka. If they had given the choice to stay without the fear of violence and persecution, obviously, I think so many would be choosing to stay in their birthplace. But what I think is useful also to note is that the legislation, it recognizes an earned roadmap for undocumented individuals. It appreciates and embraces the issue of family reunification. It increases the number of diversity visas, realizing that this is not a vulnerability, but an asset to the United States to encourage this. But I think the final point I'll note is, in terms of getting to the 60 threshold, it is pretty amazing that immigration has more support today than it has ever had. In terms of polling showing that 8 in 10 Americans recognize that immigration is a positive thing for the country. And so I think the question is, how do we make sure that our political leaders on both sides of the aisle recognize that this is an asset of our country, that coming out of a pandemic, we have to recognize who has been putting their lives on the line to protect us, who are the entrepreneurs, how do we make sure that we address population decline, and the fact that 10,000 workers a day are retiring into Social Security and Medicare. For the vitality of our nation, we need to pass comprehensive immigration reform. And as a faith-based organization, we know from our faith communities that people believe that this is not just the right thing to do and in our self-interest, but it is a matter of faith.
So this bill, for the groups we talked about, that whether they be the Dreamers or they be TPS, they are given legal status in the United States. They are given the opportunity to work legally in the United States. So they're protected against the abuses in the labor force, and they have a pathway to citizenship. It's not an easy pathway, but there's a pathway, a predictable pathway to citizenship. I think that's the key ingredients that give them their future. And it's just hard for any of us to imagine when we wake up every day very secure in our security here in the United States, knowing that we are protected by our country, to wake up every day not knowing whether there's going to be a knock on your door, literally taking you away from your family. So this bill would provide that legal status, that ability to earn a livelihood in a protected labor force, and to have a pathway to citizenship. And I think there are key ingredients that we all would want to see in any immigration bill. I want to bring up an issue that I find extremely disturbing under the Trump administration. That is the asylum policies of this country. This is a global issue, asylum. It's been since the beginning of time. America has been in the leadership of protecting those who are under fear of their lives in their host country. And we have always had a welcome sign out for those who are persecuted by their country. And of course, some of the great migrations in American history were from communities that were disrupted because of violence in their country and came here to the United States. So when I visited McAllen, Texas, and saw a policy that really was not American, the policy of remain in Mexico for people trying to seek asylum here in the United States in an unsafe environment, which violated all of our international commitments. We need to reestablish an asylum policy that really represents the values of our nation. So We know we have a new administration. We know this administration will not use the harsh policies of the Trump administration. But we have seen that policy now adopted by other countries around the world. So we really do need to exercise global leadership as it relates to protecting vulnerable people. And I would hope that this bill would be a clear message by Congress in support of that type of policy. Have either of you experienced, I've met with a lot of the faith leaders in Texas, and I was amazed at the incredible work that they were doing on the border to literally protect against abuses and to try to provide help in Mexico to families that were stranded in Mexico. And this was not really the fault of the Mexican government. It was just an area that's difficult for Mexico to control. These are individuals who are not trying to sneak into America. They are people who say, "Here I am. We want to come. We want to be part of your system. We want to be heard." I would hope that this U.S. Citizenship Act would make it clear that America's asylum policies are back to where it should be to represent the values of America.
Senator Cardin, if I can jump in there initially, completely agree. We have had border operations in New Mexico, Arizona, and now in Texas. And I will tell you that during my last visit, when we were actually traveling, it was incredible to see the role of faith and non-faith communities. We would set up operations where basically when we would get a call in the middle of the night, or sometimes we didn't get a call, it was just a public report of these poor families who would be dropped off at a public park, a bus depot, in the middle of the night, nothing but the clothes on their backs after they'd been processed through CBP and had nowhere to go. Our role was to bring them in, to provide them, room and board, help them with the logistics of their onward destination. So many, the vast majority of these people are people who have family somewhere in the country, right? We're talking about family reunification. And it was a lot of the faith communities, Catholics, Lutherans, some of our Jewish partners, the Episcopalians, who in some communities with very little themselves found it in their hearts to work along with us to make sure that we could provide the basics. And I think that this is where we do need a more coherent policy, because as you said, what we do in this country, what we do at our border sends a signal all around the world. And in 2019, we saw fewer refugees resettled all around the world. And I would say that that was because we took a step back from our role of leadership. And when we looked at what was happening in Texas, of course, we care deeply about what happened to Americans on our side of the border. But imagine setting up a tent in Matamoros, right, with less than what we had in Texas and dealing with freezing conditions in makeshift accommodations. And so this is where at our border we can do better. And I think the only other comment I would just make is, so we're working with the families and the individuals. We're also working with the children. Obviously, the number of unaccompanied children has increased because so many of these children are facing the worst of circumstances, gang violence, threats against their lives. And that is why they're fleeing and coming to the US. And so, our hope is to continue to provide foster care, but we need foster care parents. We're trying to provide group homes. So if we don't want to see Homestead and these children's influx facilities restarted, we need to figure out how to build the capacity. And part of that solution is faith-based groups.
My guests today are Krish O'Mara Vignarajah, who is the Executive Director and President of the Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Services, Gustavo Torres, the Executive Director of CASA de Maryland. And our conversation is continuing on the immigration system in our country and what we need to do. Gustavo, one of the challenges is, of course, people are here, they want to get determinations made, but the backlogs are so long that the status it gets confused, and it can be over different administrations. They still haven't had an opportunity to be heard. So what do we need to do so that we can have a system that can dispense decision-making in a fair and timely manner?
Well, immigration reform, the proposal from President Biden is going to fix that. That is the beauty of this legislation, because right now, because the system is totally broke, because the system is a system that is unjust and doesn't help people, so we have a serious problem. This legislation addresses that issue and say, you know what? We need to fix not only the people who are undocumented, but also the people who are here waiting for long time. And we need to address that issue in a fair and just way. So I believe that that is very important, and that is the reason why we support this legislation, because it's comprehensive, because addressed not only the people who are the 11 million people who are undocumented, but also the refugees, the people who have TPS, the people who already are waiting for their families for long time, and they are legal permanent resident in this country. So absolutely that legislation addressed that issue as well.
Gustavo Torres, who is the Executive Director of CASA de Maryland, and does so much of the field work on behalf of immigrants in our community. We appreciate that. I can tell you my staff in my office appreciates having your help, both of your help, because we do get a lot of casework in regards to immigration issues, and you all really have helped us a great deal by being there in the community to provide the services. So this bill is balanced in that there are employers who need workers. And I can tell you, representing the state of Maryland, we have seasonal workers, we have long-time workers in our tourist industries through the J-1 visas, we have the H-2B visas, we have the agricultural workers, we have all those in which the use of these special work visas have helped employers fill the gap in the employment market in order to provide the necessary labor to carry out these industries. We've received complaints throughout the Trump years that those numbers were reduced and not adequate in order to meet the needs. The economy of Ocean City very much depends upon having a labor force that can meet the seasonal needs. The seafood industry desperately needs workers. So this bill does get some broader support because of the business community's needs for a labor force here in the United States. That's not without controversy from organized labor, so it does present some challenges for us. But part of that is to make sure that anyone who works in the United States is protected in our labor laws. And that's one of the reasons why we want to have people with status so that we can apply labor protections to all workers in this country. And I really do applaud the different advocacy groups for working with us on these issues as well, that at times can become divisive.
No, absolutely, Senator. I just want to make a comment about this because it's very, very important. We believe that it's essential that we protect the workers. And when we protect and we provide legal status to immigrant workers, we are protecting every single worker in this country, because they are going to have more capacity to negotiate, to bargaining, right? What is happening right now, and it's happening in Maryland and in our centers, we hear that all the time, is that when any worker, complain about mistreatment or lack of payment of his or her salary, the employer threat them with call the immigration officers. So they are really scared to be able to fight for their rights because they say that they are going to call immigration. So that is the reason why I believe that is so very important, this legislation. But Senator, a very important piece, and you know this, elections have consequences, right? Very clearly. Now we are in a different situation. Now we have a president who is committed to pass immigration reform. We have the House and in the Senate also, who are them. Even that is very sure, the difference 50-50 in the Senate, but in reality, we control everything. We have been waiting for 35 years to pass immigration reform. And what we really don't want is that 2 years from now, when it's elections, that we are going to say, I'm sorry, we tried, but we didn't pass anything. So we have the opportunity to make sure that finally, we pass this immigration reform. That is the reason why we are, working in different strategies. Essential workers, right? Let's go and put the essential workers through the infrastructure bill. Let's go and pass pieces of legislations. Our main goal is the immigration reform. But at the same time, if we can pass some pieces of legislation right now, where we have support from both, from like the DREAM and TPS, that we have support from from some Republicans as well. So let's go and push for that. So that is kind of the way how we see the possibility to pass immigration reform.
Gustavo, I agree with you completely, but let me take at least this opportunity to congratulate President Biden on the passage of the American Rescue Plan. He's been president just a few weeks, and he's delivered one of the most consequential bills in the history of modern times. Half the children in our state, 57,000, are going to be lifted out of poverty as a result of the passage of that bill. The resources that are going to go into dealing with COVID-19 and getting shots in people's arms, vaccines in their arms, not only get it out quickly and efficiently, but fairly, is in this bill. The impact of the $1,400 payment that will go bring in over $6 billion to the economy of Maryland alone. And the list goes on and on and on. And the chart that we really like to look at to show that government has really worked is to take a look at the quintiles by income in America. And we know who's hurting the most. We know who's been left behind the most. And when you look at the after-tax income in the lowest quintile, the lowest 20% of Americans, they're seeing an increase in their after-tax income of 20% under this legislation. And I compare that to what was under the tax bill that passed in 2017 without my support or any Democrat support. That bill provided virtually no relief to the lowest 20%. I just mentioned those issues because, Gustavo, your point is absolutely correct, that we really do need to take advantage of this. Well, first of all, immigration reform should have been done a long time ago. It needs to be taken up. We need to get the votes. We need to pass it, but we also need to make sure we do everything to show that we were serious, that we would take every offer. Look, we don't have the votes, we don't have the votes, but we need to have those votes on the board. Members have to express themselves. And I hope we do have the votes to pass it. And I think Senator Schumer is very much determined to get immigration reform on the floor of the United States Senate. But I think your point is certainly very well taken, and one in which we share your frustration about the failure to act in the past. So we're hoping that we'll have a chance in this Congress and many other issues. We have the issues that are critically important for infrastructure in America. We got to deal with that. We have the integrity in our system. My colleague, Congressman Sarbanes, is the lead sponsor of making sure that we protect voting rights and the integrity of government itself. We need to take that up and get that done in this Congress. And the list goes on and on and on. So we have a busy agenda. And one of those agenda items clearly is immigration reform. So,
Senator, can I make a comment a little bit about the coronavirus relief that you just described that President Biden just signed back to 1 hour and a half ago?
Yes.
It's going to reduce the poverty, 50% poverty of kids, many of them who are Latinos and immigrants. So we need to celebrate that. And we need to speak about this. And the impact is going to be huge, not only the $1,400, which is very welcome, and we really appreciate that. But remember, $3,000 for the kids, for each one of the kids. That is so unbelievable, extraordinary. Obamacare is going to be with resources for the next 2 years. We got to speak about this because remember, in 2008 and 2009, we did also a good job, and we never spoke about these extraordinary changes. Now is our time to educate our communities and our families about this extraordinary package. So I do celebrate with you the leadership of President Biden and the right thing, and the senator and the House that come together and say we have to do it without only one with zero Republican support in the House. So I just want to congratulate that as well. So thank you.
Thank you. And look, your point is well taken. We really, there's a lot of issues we have to deal with. Immigration needs to be done in this Congress. So, Krish, you raised a very valid point. People don't want to leave their home. It takes a lot of courage and a lot of reason why you decide to leave your home country. We have more displaced people today than at any time, equaling the numbers that we saw at the end of World War II. That's how many people are displaced in the world. Many are displaced because of conflict in their country, where there's open war, civil unrest. We have danger in many countries, as we see in our own hemisphere with gang activities and the safety for young children growing up, in which parents want to protect their children. We have economic starvation, where people cannot make a living and they have to move in order to be able to take care of their families. We have climate migrants, where the properties, the places they lived are no longer safe to live because of rising sea levels. So there's lots of different reasons that we see migration around the world. And the United States, working with the international community, has formed coalitions to provide the humanitarian policies and resources necessary to deal with migrant populations. And America's voice has always been very strong, although I must tell you, we've taken a major setback in recent years with the policies of the Trump administration. So my point, and I want to give you a chance to talk about this, is that it's in our interest, it's in the global community's interest to invest resources to make it safe for people to remain in their homes. I remember very clearly under President Obama, under the leadership of Vice President Biden, we embarked upon a policy in Central America to rebuild the Central American countries with good governance so they could deal with the gang violence as well as alternative economies other than the drug trade and security in order to protect the country as a way to not only have a more stable neighbor in our hemisphere, which is in our national security interests, but to remove a lot of the pressure for migration for people to be able to stay in their homes. So I hope as we get into this discussion, we also talk about the core problems that have brought about the dislocation of populations, and we do things to try to mitigate those risk factors. I could also mention climate change, which is and resiliency of communities, which is another part. So it's just a subject that I hope that we don't lose sight of as we have this discussion.
Krish, you want to get, because this is to me, yes. Go ahead.
No, it is such a critical issue. And this is where I think it's really important to understand that this isn't just about doing the right thing. It is in our own self-interest, candidly, right? So when you talk about the economy, frankly, I should just say thank you for your leadership in terms of H-2B visas, obviously a critical issue here in Maryland with our seafood industry. And this is where it could cripple and has crippled this industry in the past. And that's why we need to make sure that there are pathways that are effective and efficient in terms of addressing these needs. We know here in Maryland, 1.8 billion in revenue is thanks to immigrant entrepreneurs. When we look at national security, part of our most vocal advocates sometimes are those in the national security space who say that for this to prevent violent extremism, for us to prevent war and violence, for us to secure our borders, it is about making sure that we are working with other countries, that we are investing, in our hemisphere, but really all over the world. And I think just to your point on climate, this is an issue that we're addressing today. We can talk about Central America as the Northern Triangle, and of course we need to highlight the issues of gang violence and war and conflict, but we also need to highlight that that is also the region known as the Dry Corridor. 22.5 million people today, and frankly since 2008, every year are displaced due to the climate crisis. And obviously this is where I know you have been a leader in the Senate. Thankfully, we have an administration that not just recognizes climate change, but has prioritized it. But this is where I think we can take action, and immigration is a key piece of this. And we have to recognize the history. When it comes to refugees and the unprecedented 80 million around the world who have been displaced, refugees and providing protection has always been a bipartisan issue. We've actually resettled more refugees under Republican administrations than Democratic ones. The president who resettled the highest number of refugees of any president was President Reagan. And so when we talk about the Republican Party today, who views themselves as the Reagan Party, I do hope that they think about, that we all think about that long history on both sides of the aisle of welcoming the stranger.
So, Senator, this is probably one of the most critical questions that you asked today about this, because at CASA, we believe not only in humane treatment of immigrants once they are here, but also, confronting the challenges what people are in their country of origin. And many of our staff, who are around here, are right here, come in big part because that. And I just want to, I want to mention a couple of things. Number one, the Biden bill confronts some of these elements. That is the beauty of this bill, because President Biden is so visionary enough that say we need to resolve the root causes of the problem. So he's including monies, resources, and capacity to make sure that we help, our countries who are suffering tremendously because poverty or the issue of the climate change, etc. So I think that is very important to recognize that. However, I just also want to make sure that we are humble enough to recognize the role of the US policies in some occasions to cause these problems that we are facing right over here in our country. Many of the TPS holders who are right over here is due to the wrong policies of the Reagan administration during the 80s in Central America, right? Many of them are right over here because the Reagan administration policies. So we need to make sure that we evaluate the policies that we have and the impact of our policies in those countries. Another example, the gangs. We always speak about the gangs in Central America. You know, Senator, that the gangs started in LA, in Los Angeles, and we export the problem to Central America. And now we are facing with all of these challenges. So anyway, I just want to make sure that we are humble enough and say, hey, we are making some mistakes here. We need to fix that. We need to make sure that we respect the human rights and the democracy of these countries as well. So anyway, I just want to make sure that, that we recognize this, so in that way we can resolve the root causes of the problems that we are facing with the immigration issues.
Well, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee held a hearing earlier this week on the status of democracies around the world. Secretary Albright was one of our witnesses, and the facts are that we're seeing a decline of democracies around the world. And when we see a decline of democracies, we see a rise of autocratic policies which are oppressive against the people, and you see conflict. And it leads to the type of circumstances where millions of people flee and become dislocated. So we say this frequently, but our investments in providing a more secure environment globally for people and countries is in our national security interests. It's also in our financial interest. We do better investing in the growth of countries so they can take care of their own needs rather than having people have to leave their countries and end up in our country because of the proximity, if it's the Western Hemisphere, or because of our global responsibilities to take in refugees. And we welcome that, but it would be better for all if the circumstances in their native country was safe for them to remain. So these are investments that we need to continue to make. And quite frankly, I must tell you, I really do think the members of the Senate get that, and they're prepared to make those investments. I think we have to do a better job with the public in understanding why it's in our own self-interest to invest in security and future in global communities around the world. So just a little bit of a commercial on behalf of America's involvement. And as we all know, if America doesn't lead, the global community is going to suffer. We need American leadership.
Totally.
All right, can you get us the 60 votes we need?
Well, please, you go ahead.
Well, I'll say that it has been really heartening to see, senators who have stepped up on both sides of the aisle. I just did an event with former Senator Flake. But I do think that there are some reasonable individuals on both sides of the aisle who know that our system was broken even before the last 4 years, that there are ways in which we are holding ourselves back as a nation because we don't have a more effective, efficient system. We continue to be that beacon of hope and freedom, and it works to our advantage because we do bring incredible talent and drive to this country. And so my hope is that, as you said, Senator Cardin, that there will be enough senators who have the courage to recognize that this is the right thing to do. It is who we are as a nation, given that 99% of us trace our ancestry to somewhere beyond our borders, that it is in our economic interest, that it is in our national security interest, and that if we lead, the rest of the world will follow.
I just want to say that I wish, and we are fighting and trying to work in Pennsylvania, where we are, with Senator Tommy to convince him to support immigration reform. So we are working really hard. But I just want to tell you that, based on what I see it and the way how the Republicans are responding to different challenges that we face, including the coronavirus, relief. I am not very optimistic about having the 60 votes. So we need to speak about what other options do we have. We have the filibuster. I mean, and Senator, that is something that a lot of people think about. We need to speak about what we can do in the reconciliation, how we can include, the essential workers. So we need to explore different options because, again, as I mentioned before, if we don't do it, it's another time that we are going to be so disappointed that we control everything, the House, the Senate, and the White House, and we didn't pass anything because we didn't have the 60 votes. So I want to explore that options. I want to see how, in this democracy, we can bring relief to these families.
Well said, and I can assure you we're going to explore every opportunity. I don't look forward to another vote-a-rama going into the wee hours of the morning, but we do celebrate the results. So I am certain we'll have another chance at reconciliation, which is a simple majority. But I am also confident that there are Republicans who are interested in this subject, as you all both pointed out. And perhaps we can take this in different steps, but we need to show results. I think that is absolutely certain. Well, let me thank both of my guests for joining me today. This has been a great discussion on immigration reform. We hope that we'll be able to have you back to celebrate the enactment of comprehensive immigration reform. Krish O'Mara Vignarajah, who is the CEO of the Lutheran Refugee Service, does a fabulous job in our community. Gustavo Torres, the Executive Director of CASA de Maryland. Both of you are champions for us in helping the people of our community. Thank you for the great work that you're doing, and let me thank those who are shared viewing us today on Facebook Live. We'll be back again in a few weeks on another subject. Everybody stay well.